Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is the National Girls Collaborative Project National Webinar, Connecting Out-of-School Time Activities and STEM Identity. We're happy to have you with us here today from all across the country, it looks like. You can continue to introduce yourself in the chat as you join, and please take a moment right now to respond to the poll here on your screen. I do want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded. We will post the recording on the event page once the webinar is complete, along with any of the resources presented throughout this webinar. Everyone in this audience right now is muted, so please use the chat pod to ask questions throughout the course of the webinar, and we will be tracking those, and we'll have time for a Q&A at the end of the session. You can also use that chat to share insights, resources, and chat with one another. So we hope you enjoy this webinar today, and we're going to go ahead and end this poll and get started. The vision of the National Girls Collaborative Project is to bring together organizations committed to encouraging girls to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and computer science. The photos you see here are just one example of how we facilitate discussion among stakeholders by offering structured networking activities at every NGCP and local collaborative event. During collaboration networking, dynamic discussions between individuals matching needs and resources can highlight ways for organizations to work together to impact the youth they are serving. We all know there is a diversity of high-quality resources available, and many of you have little time to search for the strategies and content to improve your program. NGCP helps you address this need via our website, newsletters, online databases, social media, and webinars just like this one. When programs are stronger and more sustainable, girls are better served. And finally, we use the leverage of a network and collaboration of girls serving STEM programs and champions to create the tipping point for gender equity in STEM. The National Girls Collaborative Project engages in a number of activities virtually, nationally, and locally through state-based collaborative leadership teams. NGCP partners with organizations to scale and deliver content such as the Leap into Science National Network in partnership with the Franklin Institute and Crypto Club in partnership with the University of Chicago, both funded by the National Science Foundation, serving hundreds of educators via statewide networks. NGCP manages the Connectory, the largest national database of STEM opportunities. The Connectory also provides a way for program providers to connect and collaborate with each other. FabFems is an international database of female role models from many STEM fields. They are passionate about the work they do and are ready to connect with programs to spark girls' interests. NGCP is also working with Lyda Hill Philanthropies and has launched the If Then Collection, a digital library housing photos, videos, and other media of women in STEM fields. And locally, state collaborative leadership teams offer convenings for educators and researchers for professional development. They also offer mini grants for innovative projects when funding is available and distribute their own regular newsletters spotlighting local resources. The National Girls Collaborative Project has been partially funded by the National Science Foundation since 2002. We began as the Northwest Girls Collaborative Project, focused on Washington and Oregon, and then, as we presented our collaboration model to others, we were invited to expand across the United States. While NGCP programs and partners are located in every state, we have 33 collaboratives serving 41 states, facilitating collaboration between 42,500 organizations who collectively serve 20.2 million girls and 10 million boys. And with that, I have the pleasure of introducing our webinar speakers today. We are joined today by Dr. Susan Sunbury, who is an educational researcher and project manager at the Science Education Department at the Center for Astrophysics, Harvard and Smithsonian. Sue has a PhD and a bachelor's degree in marine biology from Boston University, as well as a master's in elementary education from Lesley University. Sue has more than 25 years of experience in the development and implementation of formal and informal research and evaluation projects, including at the Boston Children's Museum, the Harvard Museum of Natural History, the Ecotarium, the Museum of Science Boston, and the New England Aquarium. Dr. Chen Chen is a research associate in the Science Education Department at Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. He is primarily interested in evaluation and assessment in the field of science education, with ongoing research in educational technology, conceptual growth, persistence and dropout, computer science education, massive open online courses, and gender in science. His prior work focused on technological assistance for readers with dyslexia to learn in STEM. Through collaboration, he works on language, literacy, and media technology and policy in the early childhood education settings. He earned his master's and doctorate in education from Harvard Graduate School of Education. So thank you so much to Dr. Susan Sunbury and Dr. Chen Chen, and I am going to turn it over to Sue to start the presentation today.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Great. Thank you, Marissa. And I was looking at your chat today, and it looks like a lot of people are working directly with students and programs, which is great, because today we're going to be talking about connecting OST activities and STEM identity. And some of you are probably familiar with STEM identity, how students think about themselves as science learners, how others see them, if they see themselves as belonging in STEM. And this is important because, among other things, STEM identity can increase the likelihood that a student will actually continue to develop science literacy and maybe even follow a path to a STEM career or a career that requires STEM education. So hopefully you'll take a lot from this identity information. You know, a lot of programs, more and more programs, are including STEM identity as their intended outcome. And I'd say that these programs can actually be part of a feedback loop. If a student finds that experiences are engaging and satisfying, the experience can strengthen their STEM identity, and that might reinforce ongoing participation in learning. So there's a whole bunch of research out there on STEM identity, and I would suggest, if you're interested in this beyond the talk, that you go to informalscience.org, and I can put a link up there sometime during this presentation for you to take a look at all the other research that's going on. But for right now, let's talk about our study. Today I'm going to introduce the study, and then Chen's going to help share some of the results that we have. Our project is called FROST, or Female Representation in Out-of-School Time Science, but we really looked at all types of STEM activities. We looked at a large variety of opportunities available to pre-college students, and those are both structured and unstructured. And we wanted to find out who participates in these activities, especially females and underrepresented minorities, and we wanted to know what effects these opportunities have on participants' interests and identity and career interests. And again, today we're going to be focusing on STEM identity. So there's lots of ways that you can look at identity. You can measure it. If you're working in your programs, you can actually do program evaluation just on a program-by-program basis. It's certainly good for your program, but you might have a small number of subjects, which would limit your statistical power, and you may only be able to measure short-term student satisfaction. You might also want to do a longitudinal study using the same students for a long period of time, but this can be very expensive, and if you've ever tried it, it takes a long time. So we tried a different approach. We used a retrospective cohort study, and these are studies that ask students at a single point in time to recall the experiences from their past. And they're pretty useful because they're large scale. You can really get a representative sample across the country. They're generalizable, probably more so than these small program-by-program evaluations. And you can use many hypotheses. And again, this is one data set that we've used, and we've presented several different webinars, which we'll let you know about later, all in the same data set. Again, today it's just identity. And as I mentioned before, you can do this in a short amount of time. So, what is this? Well, we developed a survey to ask first-year college students to recall their earlier STEM experiences. And we created questions based on a review of literature, survey of stakeholders, which would be all of you, people like you who are working in the field, and we surveyed students. We then pilot tested the survey and then sent it out to over 30,000 students in these compulsory first year courses. Those are the courses that are maybe in the English department or the writing department, of course that class that everybody has to take. And we did this to get a wide range of both STEM and non-STEM students with broad career interests. We chose our schools from a stratified random sample of 2-year, 4-year community colleges and universities. And the reason we did this, again, is to get a really broad range of students. So what happened? Well, we were actually able to collect data from 15,725 students across the country. Again, very large scale, and it only took 2 months to collect the data. Okay. So, our survey questions. We developed a comprehensive survey of 33 questions. They're actually multi-part questions, and surprisingly, it only took about 20 minutes for the students to complete. We asked questions about interest, identity, career motivation. We asked about participation in OST activities, both structured, which are like clubs and competitions, camps, museum programs, and unstructured activities. And this could be anything from baking to gardening to stargazing. We asked about the subjects they take in school, their grades, scores on standardized tests, because back then they took them. And we asked about family interests and families' involvement in STEM. We also asked about access and barriers to participation in these types of activities. And of course, we asked about demographics. So just to give you an example, this is STEM identity. We actually asked 16 questions based on our team's past research on STEM identity. But these were the 6 questions that we used in the analysis that Jen's going to discuss. So really what I mentioned before about seeing yourself as a STEM person, how your family sees you, how your friends see you, how your teachers see you, and if you feel like you belong in STEM. These are all factored together. The kinds of activities that we looked at, as I mentioned, we had unstructured activities. We had 24 of them, and we asked how often they participated in these activities, both in early grades, K through 4, 5 through 8, and also in high school. Again, these are the activities that students might do on their own without supervision. Hobbies, reading, TV, things of that nature. We also asked about structured activities. And these are activities that are probably facilitated by an adult. And competitions, clubs, lectures, events, things that can happen at school, but after school or outside of school hours or in another environment. And then finally, we asked about opportunity within these activities. And these could occur across many different activities. So if you look at these, interacting with a STEM mentor, you can do that across lots of different activities. So here are the activities in total. There are 60. And Jen's now going to tell us a little bit about how these are connected to STEM identity. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. I think you can hear me okay. Thank you, Sue, for introduce the background of the study. I want to encourage everybody to use the link in the chat that Marisa or that Tara just provided. It's a Google Drive. It's not a data set. It's actually this slide. I assume, right? So if you download this slide, I want to, well, in the next couple of minutes, I will show you how to navigate these slides because there are 60 activities and they are categorized in different grades. So there are hundreds of graphs that you will see very soon. So I want to show you how to use all of these hyperlinks to jump back and forth between this manual page and each of these activities at each grades, right? So if you can download it, I'm going to show you how to navigate it, and then we will give you some time to explore on yourself. But before that, I just want to show you the options here, and then how we can interpret the results that I'm going to show you, right? All right. Okay, so you see that there are 3 chunks of colored boxes. The gray colors are the OSC activities that are categorized into 3 different grade levels: K to 4, 5 to 8, 9 to 12. And the blue colored boxes are activities that we only asked about in 2 grade levels, 5 to 8 and K to I believe it should be 9 to 12, sorry. And then the orange boxes, we did not differentiate between grades, because they are mostly about if a student had the opportunity to, for example, interact with a STEM mentor, or work on a team on a STEM projects, or learn about STEM careers. I should use this error more often though. Learning about STEM careers, interact with STEM mentor. So these are mostly about opportunities. So we only ask if they have any of this opportunity before they come into college. All right. So let me give you an example. If you have these slides opened and you are in page 18, which is this menu, let me give you an example. Say you're interested in, let me find something that may be interesting. Let's say if you're interested, if like a makerspace and DIY STEM activities is associated with a STEM identity. What do? You just click this link. However, because of this Adobe Meeting settings, I cannot click this link, but I'm sure you can. So I'm going to just jump to this page, right? I'm going to jump to this page, which I believe is page 97. Right? Okay. Here I am at page 97. You should be able to just click that hyperlink and you will land in this page, right? And after we review this graph, the easiest way to jump back to the menu is click here, and you will immediately jump back to the index, which is a menu page. All right. So at the top couple of lines, you can see the first row says that the name of the activity, which is maker DIY STEM activity or events. And the second row, it shows which grades this graph concerns. Now this is 9 to 12, right? And the next page is supposed to be the same activity, but for grade 5 to 8, right? Let me come back here. And I want to remind you that all of these effects or the results of the predicted STEM identity of the students, in all of these models, we have controlled for the beginning, the STEM career interest at the beginning of the period, right? So this period is high school period, so we controlled students' self-reported STEM career interest at the beginning of high school. Now in the next slide, you see this period concerns middle school grades, so we controlled for the students' self-reported STEM career interest at the beginning of middle school, right? Let me come back to the high school page. Again, the y-axis is our predicted STEM identity, right? And this identity is constructed by averaging a list of 6 identity items, right? And we standardize them. So 0 means the grand average across the whole sample, right? 0.5 means 0.5 standardized deviation above the mean, and negative 0.5 means 0.5 standardized deviation below the mean. All right. Here on the x-axis is how often a student reported that they participate in Maker DIY. I should use this arrow more often. Maker DIY STEM activity during high school, and there are 3 options they can select. They never participate them, they participated sometimes, or they participate in such activities very often, right? So these are the only 3 options they can choose in our survey. And here, the blue and circle is the answer made by male students. Triangle and orange are answers made by female students. And the circle, or I mean the shape in the center, is the mean, and the bars corresponds to one standardized error confidence interval, right? Because we have a pretty big sample, so most of the cases the standard error is quite narrow, but there are cases where the confidence interval is wide, mostly because we have few students that fill into this bucket. All right. Okay. Now, how do we interpret this? If we look at this column for students who said they never participate in any of the Maker or DIY STEM activities during high school, their STEM identity is around the grand average, whereas male students has a higher, which is significantly higher than female students. So we can consider this gap, the gender gap, at by default. Like if none of the students participate in any makerspace DIY activity, we will usually observe a pretty big gender gap in terms of STEM identity at the beginning of college, right? What that is reported at the beginning of college, right? Here, if you look at the middle of the column, we see that these are students who said, oh, we participated, or I participated in Maker DIY activities sometimes during high school. And we can see that everybody had a boost in their STEM identity. And we can see this boost applied to female students to more degree. But it seems that it helps both boys and girls. And we can also see that these 2 gender groups almost converged, right? You see this confidence interval nearly overlapped the mean of the boys. If we look at the right-hand column, the 3rd column, if students participate in these activities often during high school, their STEM identity is highest among all conditions. And there's a huge boost for both gender. And again, the gender gap that is observed here on the left-hand column nearly converged at the right-hand column. So again, be reminded that this is after controlling for the beginning of high school STEM career interest. So like assuming that everybody has a fixed or the same STEM career interest at the beginning of high school. If they participate in DIY and makerspace often, we anticipate that their STEM identity is at the top among all, and the gender gap should nearly disappear. But if they did not participate in any of this activity, we should anticipate that there should be a gender gap, and female students' identity is below the grand mean. Male students' identity is just above the grand mean. Right? So let me give you some other example, but let me show you how to jump back to the menu. You just click this button, which I cannot because I'm on this conference room that forbid me to click on the hyperlinks. So I'm going to jump back to page 18. If you follow me, you should be back to this page as well. And let's jump to another activity that I find to be particularly interesting, which is STEM Cafe. Where is that? STEM Cafe. I'm sorry about these. Here's STEM Cafe. I'm sorry about these fonts. They looks all right in my PowerPoint, but when it converted to PDF, it got squished. So let's say maybe someone is organizing a STEM cafe where students can talk about STEM-related topics and news with the professionals or with the educators in the informal way. Well, what will this informal activity bring about to the gender gap between boys and girls in STEM activity? Well, you just click on it, which I cannot. I'm going to jump to page 101. All right, so if you have landed on this page, you will see that this is for STEM Cafe. Eat, drink, chat about STEM with professionals during high school age, controlling for the beginning of high school career interest. And we can see that students who have never done it are around just above and below the mean for boys and girls, and there is a gender gap. And for the students who participate in STEM Cafe sometimes, they are also just around the grand average. It seems that girls have got a benefit while the boys are remaining flat, right? Boys are flat, girls got a boost, so that effectively narrowed gender gap. But if both genders participate in a STEM Cafe often during high school, both gender will get a boost. And interestingly, girls had the most salient boost that effectively bring them above the boys, right? So now the girls will have a stronger STEM identity than the boys if they follow into this condition, right? And again, this is during the high school grade. If we just flip the page one slide to the next slide, we can see that this is the effect for the middle school grade. We can see that the effect appears to be smaller, and the gender gap is narrowing. We can see the narrowing gender gap, but the girls did not excel the boys. All right, so this is another example. Let me go back. If you can simply click this index. Let me go back to Another example. Let's look at the orange bin. If you're interested about if students had any opportunity to learn about STEM careers, what pattern should we observe? You should just click it, and I will just jump to it. That should be the very last slide, almost the last slide, right? Okay. Again, this is activity learning about STEM career. We just say it's all school because it can happen at any grade. We controlled for the middle school career, beginning of middle school career interest. So that's the earliest career interest that we have asked for. So we just control for the very the earliest milestone measurement that we have. On the Y is STEM activity, on the X is just a yes or no, right? Because we just only ask if you have this opportunity or not, or if you experienced this event or not. And if they say no, we did not have the opportunity to learn anything about career STEM interest, STEM career interest. Boys is just above the mean, and girls were below the mean. We can see there is a gender gap. But if students said they had this opportunity and they experienced this opportunity, we should see boost in STEM activity for both genders, and the gender gap is narrowing between boys and girls. All right. So there are actually there are 60 STEM OSC activities. There are different grade options. So, among these hundreds of activities, there are a couple of that's shown to be very interesting. What I find to be most interesting are that summer camps and clubs and cafe, like things that enable more sociable opportunities turns out to be most effective in narrowing the gender gap, and in some cases that the girls excel the boys if they participate in such activities more often. And there are also other activities that are related to hands-on experience, collecting data, be a citizen scientist, and help scientists to collect or analyze data. These appear to have a huge boost for both genders and narrow or basically converge the gender gap. So the seems to be some consensus there from my observation, and the National Girls Collaborative has been very actively advocating for role modeling, for STEM mentoring. So you can just click on this and check for yourself if they are effective, and if they are effective, for whom is most effective, right? So there are some activities that we find that the effectiveness is quite flat, and so you should be warned that not every activity is guaranteed to be effective. But I assume that the audience today, provided you come from very diverse background, you may be interested in some activity that speak to your interest the most. So I'll just leave you some time to explore, and then we'll come back and share, what are the activities you find most interesting or most surprising or inspiring? All right, I'll leave it to Marie.
Thank you, Chen. Yes, we've had some questions come through in the chat, so I think we'll take a moment to answer some of those now. And then, as you mentioned, Chen, we'll give a few moments for folks to kind of search through, and do a quick cursory glance of the slides that were shared and see if any other questions come up. We're also going to do a brief sort of discussion board in a little bit. So we've been tracking your questions. Thank you all for typing those in the chat. Let's see. We have a question from Linda Kalkelis. There's a lot of diversity in maker and DIY activities and programs. Can you talk about the specific elements within these activities and programs that may be leading to increased STEM identity? And I know Susan was chatting over in the public chat saying, we don't have that grain size about the activities, but I don't know if you want to maybe provide a little bit more information, either Susan or Chen.
Well, I would just say that we have information, the information about the activities themselves are pretty much what is it, naming the activities and did you participate or not, and how often you did this. So you're right, there are a lot of differences within DIY and maker. And so, as I suggested, the things that we found were successful, we might want to go back and do either, we can do some analysis to see if the opportunities that we found were part of DIY. We could go back and look and see what opportunities in our list of opportunities were also found in the maker. Or we can do another study. And, we've always talked about doing a more qualitative study to follow up on this and really dig deep into these activities.
Thank you. We have a question here from Linda Chen. How do you connect this data in a longitudinal way? Is it possible to show whether exposure in K through 4 and then in 5 through 8 and then in 9 through 12 would result in higher STEM identity than just one period of their lives?
We do have a project that look at this change over time in a longitudinal way. I think probably we presented in the earlier talk for National Girls Collaborative. So we do have a slide for that, and the slide is should be searchable in the website from National Girls Collaborative. So if Marisa can share that link, and you can take a look at that, and that's another complicated and pattern to observe. That we call it the kitchen sink project. Basically, we can see that students are losing interest in some career interests, but at the same time they may be converted to some other career interests. So it's very fuzzy, and some people call it the STEM, the leaky STEM pipeline, and we basically was able to replicate that there seems to be a lot of STEM career interests at earlier grades, and then that start to weigh out, and more students become more interested in a variety of non-STEM career interests, which may not be a bad thing. But we were interested in what are the activities that can hold students or attract students in or into the STEM track. But that's another slide. We actually do have some information. You can explore that.
Yes, thank you, Chen. And for those, I don't think we said this at the beginning, but we have done several webinars with Sue and others from the Center for Astrophysics about this very large, data set that they were able to collect and different ways to interpret it and analyze it. And so after this webinar, we're going to be sending out a little brief report that kind of puts all of those resources together in one place. So stay tuned for that. It will be shared from the National Girls Collaborative Project, and it's a great way to kind of look at different ways you can use this, fantastic information that the Center for Astrophysics has collected. Let me take a peek over at questions. Let's see. We had a question from Krista Galloway. Any analysis of the different effects in middle school versus high school? Are there trends there?
You can actually get an immediate impression of the contrast between the effect of participation during middle school and during high school. I think the general trend pattern is that high school appears to give a stronger boost compared to middle school, but this is understandable because high school is closer to the beginning of college than maybe what the students remembered most clearly. And again, as I mentioned about the leaky pipeline, that students who participate in for students who participate in some of this OST during middle school, only a proportion of them stay in these activities into high school, and so those who kind of dropped out from these activities during high school probably have decided that STEM is not for them. So it's natural that we see that the middle school images present more attenuated effects than the high school graphs. Yeah, but you can actually do some comparison, just flipping between the pages. They should always next to each other. High school first and then middle school.
Thank you. And we had a question from Colleen asking, it would be helpful to know which of these activities were transformational in terms of interest and which were more about the feedback loop that happened after interest was established. And I did share in the chat, Sue and her group presented specifically about student interest in STEM it was February, sorry, I think I said January, but I don't think I said a month, so it was last February. So there's a lot of great information in that webinar recording, as well as the data set and the slides and the chat. But I'm wondering if either Sue or Chen wants to speak to that question around, how much is transformational in terms of interest, or about sort of this feedback loop after the interest.
Do you want to comment?
Chan, do you want to take that? Well, if it's about the data itself, you might want to talk about, we have developed some path models, but we haven't done that one specifically, so that's something we could look into.
We could actually do some analysis to partially answer this question, but this is a rather complicated question about the feedback loop. Do you mean that these are students who are already interested in STEM, and then for example, during middle school, and then they participated in these activities in high school? Maybe some are discouraged, some are even more encouraged, and then maybe their future STEM interests bifurcate from there. That will be a really interesting story. I just don't know if our if our data can actually answer that, because there's so many variables that are varying at the same time. We have so many different activities. But exploratively and descriptively, we can actually try it. I believe that if you look at our earlier kitchen sink slides, there are some results that can give you some hints, right?
Right, and for this data set, though, that you presented today, Chen, you did control for interest, prior interest.
I controlled for their prior interest, so that try to give students a fair ground in terms of comparison. But yeah, I could update my analysis as trying to include the interaction effect between activity and their background career interest and see what I find. So yeah, I may do that and give Marisa updated slides and graphs, and you probably will see some additional slides in the next couple of weeks.
Great, thank you. All right. We have a question here from Sandra. Do you have recommendations for measuring impact on STEM interest and/or identity in STEM programs? For instance, we want to measure how participating in making activities impacts STEM interest, identity, and self-efficacy. How could
there are many different ways to do that, but there are existing and kind of widely accepted questions you can ask. So we usually use a list of questions, just probe if students consider themselves as a science person, if the parents see me as a science person, if my teacher see me as a science person. So we just ask the same question but from different observers' point of view, and then we construct a average composite, or we construct a latent score using some more complicated latent structure models. So that is really widely used, but there are other ways to measure identity. And for self-efficacy, we ask, if I'm looking forward to learning more about STEM, if I'm feeling comfortable learning about STEM, if I feel comfortable teach about STEM to somebody. So we in our survey we have more than 10 items just like that. So again, we can create a composite score, or we can go to the latent approach.
Thank you, and that makes me.
But again, if you just want to have one item, if you have space limit, just ask, I see myself as a STEM person, and I think most of people in this field would.
Thank you. It also makes me wonder if when we sort of share that little report that's showing all of the webinars we've done with Center for Astrophysics in this research study, if a helpful resource could be, here are questions you can ask that will get you data on STEM identity. Here are questions you can ask to get data on STEM efficacy. So folks running programs can just have a quick list of questions that they may want to include in their own program evaluation. So maybe that's something we can provide. All right, let's see. We have a couple more questions, but I'm also aware of time, and we wanted to engage all of you in the audience in discussion. So I'm going to see if we can answer these last two questions quickly, and then we'll transition to a discussion board and come back to close up the webinar. So we have a question here from Linda Chen. Does the data also include discrepancies between number of female and male participants who are exposed to STEM activities? the graphs don't show the amount of participation by each gender. It would be interesting to see which activity has a good lift on STEM identity for females, but low participation today. The problem is usually the design
and is provided in a previous webinar. So if you explore some of our earlier slides, you should be able to see that. And you are right that women students participate to less in many of these activities than the men students. We probably even provided a breakdown by race. I don't know if that's true, and Sue can jump in.
Yeah, so just to remind people, and Marissa's done this, we do have these other webinars, and one was about, just about that, was about participation, and we broke it down by gender, we broke it down by race and ethnicity for each activity. So we showed it two ways. One, you know, what are the activities that females are more likely to participate in, and then we looked at it activity by activity to see how females participated. So that we have that data. That was from something we presented in August. And back in February, we presented on interest, so you can compare the interest and the identity data when we pull it all together for you after this webinar.
See in the chat, some folks are pulling it together themselves. That's great. Sandra's saying she's got one of the other slide decks from a previous presentation and this one, and she's kind of looking and comparing and looking at both of those results. So we have one last question, and then we'll switch it over to our discussion board for a few minutes. So we have a question from Michael Smith. It would be interesting to connect how engagement occurs. Is it self-directed, teacher-educator directed, or recommended, parent-directed, fellow STEM professional directed, or even recommended from someone else? So do you have any insights into sort of how the engagement?
Sue can answer this, right? We have the question about who encouraged you into STEM. I don't know if you reported earlier.
Right. So that we do have, you know, it's, we don't have the answer to that exact question. Is what got you into activities? We have questions about who encouraged you into STEM. So we have a whole slew of choices, if it's parents or teachers, or and we actually just had one of our master's level students put up a presentation on that, and she'll be writing a paper on that. So we'll know about who encourages. We'll have that presented hopefully very soon. That paper will come out. Again, you know, there's lots of little pieces to answer these questions, and so that's the tricky thing, is that the data set is so large that we know different pieces of it, and we're trying to put the interactions together and see where they fit.
All right, so I know we're running close to the end of time, but we did want to engage all of you in the audience in a short discussion board. So very soon, your screen is going to change to show 2 discussion board windows with these questions on them. How might you use this data in your own work? And what else do you want to know about out-of-school time STEM experience and identity development? I think from your questions, we've maybe discerned some of the answers to that second question, but any other thoughts you have? Your screen is changing now, and we'd love to have you type in. We'll take about 30 more seconds to respond to these questions. Okay, thank you everyone for responding. It's great to see all of these ideas here in these discussion boards. I'm going to ask Sue to unmute and just kind of share some of the high-level trends she's seeing in ways to use the data. And then we'll follow with Chen sharing some of the things he's noticing in the OST STEM experiences and identity development, and what else you might want to know. Sue, you are muted if you're trying to speak now. That's okay. I'll share some of the things I notice and we'll see if we can get Sue. So I'm seeing a lot of people talking about ways that they might use this data set to design activities and programming. Folks who are interested in sharing this data with fundraisers and folks who might be willing to support your program to just show the impact of why you do what you do. Looking to make decisions about the types of activities, especially when you may have limited resources at your disposal. And I'll turn it over to maybe Chen. We'll see if he can unmute to share some of the high-level thoughts from the other side.
Yeah, can you hear me? I assume you can. Thank you for all of these questions and comments. We do have some information that we can potentially answer some of your questions. For example, racial disparity and SES disparities that I think if you go back to our previous webinar slides, you can see the racial breakdown. And in terms of SES, we did not ask about their income. The best proxy we had is their parental education. I think somebody also mentioned that parent education is interesting. It is indeed very interesting that actually students who have parents who are highly educated and they did not go to STEM out of school activities are very determined. Actually, they are the most determined above all to not going into STEM. Right? We are seeing that maybe these are the parents who are very resourceful and knowledgeable about the career market, the job market, the career path, and they have taught their kids not to go to STEM because maybe they just have other options. Maybe they can just inherit their family business, right? And again, those parents who are highly educated and then their kids have some STEM out of school experience are also very, very interested in going to STEM. So we can see that parents who are highly educated can cast a very strong influence on their students, on their kids' career interests either way, right? We are seeing some questions about what about K4? It is we didn't spend too much time zooming into it because each year we recruit graduate students to explore the data. So far, none of these graduate students are super interested in K4, so we don't have, we didn't gather much information, but we do have actually earlier paper that shows that just informal conversation and storytelling about STEM during K4 is really important for students' STEM career interests and STEM identity. So that is a published paper.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Chen.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, we are a few minutes over time.
Yeah, right.
So I'm going to take us back to our just closing slide. Thank you to the folks who have stayed with us all the way through a few minutes later. We appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us today. There is a lot of information for you all to sort through in the presentation that was shared today. We will share the recording. We will share this complete presentation on the event page after this webinar is complete. And I did want to let everyone know that we have 2 National Girls Collaborative Projects events coming up. So feel free to sign up on our website. We'd love to see you there. Tomorrow we have an event called Educating Outside the Exhibit, Transferring Museum Skills to Other Fields. So if you yourself are a museum employee, are interested in what's been going on in the museum field, that's a really interesting webinar to attend. The other coming up on May 11th is featuring Girls Steam Ahead with NASA free resources, sharing what resources are available and how you might use them in your programming. So thank you again to Dr. Chen and Dr. Sunbury. We appreciate having you here. This was really great information with really fantastic questions. So thank you, audience, as well, for your great participation. Chen and Dr. Sunbury are sharing their emails there in the chat. So I think feel free to reach out to them with any specific questions. And hopefully we'll get that report to you soon. Stay tuned. Thank you.